Welcome to the Leaderboard with Matt Towery and John Hall, the only podcast that litigates the results, slices through the spin, and keeps score on everything that actually matters, which of course includes golf. So listen in now to the next episode as we jump right in. 4.
Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Towery. Welcome back to the Leaderboard. You know, we discuss things all over the country, politics, other issues, always try to touch golf, although today we're not going to be touching much of it. But the Georgia primary runoffs. Georgia is a critical piece of the Republicans trying to hold on to the U.S. Senate, and the governor's position is extremely powerful in Georgia, one of the most powerful executive positions in the nation. And we're down to candidates in both of those races and a few others. Insider advantage, which has always had, we've been polling since 2000 in Georgia. We polled for first WXIA in Atlanta, then we moved to WSB TV. I was a political analyst at both of those. And then finally with Fox 5, where I was political analyst and we polled for Fox 5 and other Fox affiliates over the years. We have always been known as being the very best at pegging these races. So tonight, you're going to get a double treat. After you hear our winners and losers, and after you hear from our guest, who's going to be talking about voting fraud, which is incredibly important given what took place in California, I'm going to tell you the new Insider Advantage polls, and you'll get an even additional bonus because if you stick to the very end, you'll hear not only my analysis based on the polling we did and have not released so far this week, but I'll be adding to it an additional piece that will tell you and only our viewers what the Insider Advantage poll says the night before this whole thing starts, because we'll release it Sunday night. You will see it Sunday night. Tuesday's the last day, and then it's voting time. So whatever that final poll is, that will be what's going to happen, I can assure you. So welcome, John Hall. Good to see you.
You too, Matt. Hope things are good down in South Florida.
They're great. I understand you're in Washington, D.C. How'd that go?
It's good. I'm in the middle of a 3-week trial. I've got 2 weeks gone, another week to go. And unlike Terry Bradshaw says, I hope we come out good in this one, and we'll make it.
Terry, we're going to have to get him to come in and correct the record on that one, right? I've heard more comments about what a great interview that was, though. Everybody loved Terry.
And I'll tell you, this week in D.C. is crazy with the fight coming up and the 250 celebration and all of those issues. It's really interesting.
Oh, gosh, I tell you what, it makes me happy that I'm not in D.C. this weekend, to be honest with you. I've had to go up there too much recently. So I always say, this is what I always tell people when they get to D.C. I say, welcome to Washington, D.C., where everybody is more important than you are. And
it's like Lake Wobegon. Everybody's above average.
Everybody's above everybody else, and they all want to let you know it too. It's incredible. They don't realize that when you get out of D.C. and you look at how they do things, you think, what a bunch of idiots. In all seriousness. Sure. All right, John, so here's what we're going to do. We have our guest coming up in a few minutes. It's going to be a fantastic show. We're going to talk about fraud with one of the top experts in the country on election fraud, following that California debacle. And we'll throw a little Georgia stuff in, too, because we're really going to be a little Georgia-centric today with these Georgia races coming up. But, John, I'm going to let you basically kick off the winners and losers. I want to hear who your winners and losers are pretty rapidly, and I'll say something if I...
Well, you know, I got to start with the New York Knicks. Despite the reception that was given to President Trump in the Game 3 that he went to, the coming back from 29 points down, the greatest comeback in NBA final history, was pretty amazing. We'll wait and see if they can win one more game from San Antonio, but it looks pretty good for them. So certainly winners.
Well, that's good. I could give a rat's ass about the New York Knicks or anything else that would do in basketball, but that's okay. Go Knicks. You know, I'll say it because Linda's from New York and Blair's everybody's in New York and Sean's from New York, so I'll say go Knicks, whatever. But I thought it was a fantastic game, and it was phenomenal. By the way, I would have never sent President Trump to that game. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. We knew it was going to be a disaster. and it was. Anyway, go ahead.
Especially the setup. And I'm going to switch to a loser and then come back to a winner. But the next loser is really Seattle, Washington, and the state of California. The mayor who lived with her parents before she got a paycheck, but being of Seattle before she got a paycheck, being mayor. What she's doing in that city, ruining neighborhoods, ruining the city, ruining business. I just hope at some point people who, whether you're conservative or liberal, you wake up and realize that they're destroying our country with this kind of policies. And the same thing in California, this ridiculous voting system where you have to go forever. And it's just boxes and boxes of vote that is wide open for fraud. If you don't have confidence in the electoral system, it's going to fail. So I put the state of California government and the government of Seattle as the losers.
I'll ditto both of those. But hey, listen, that mayor sure is pretty, isn't she?
Yeah. Careful, Matt.
I can say what I want on this show. She scares me. I don't know. She just has this look like, maybe she should have been in a horror movie or something. It's like a zombie.
Yeah, she looks to me like she's wandering around with no moral compass. So we'll see. But let's go to a good winner here. And I know this is one that sometimes people are negative about, is data centers. Folks, AI is coming. AI is changing our world. It's going to make us better. It's not going to replace us. And you're going to have data centers. And every day right now is focused on these huge hybrid centers that take power and electricity. But there is a new market out there of community-based data centers that are 10,000 to 5,000 square feet that don't have this process. Oracle and others are really pushing those. That's going to be a revolution, and that's going to be a winner, along with the fact that I understand, it's not announced yet, but I understand by this time, Monday, Tuesday of next week, that there will be a small nuclear reactor powering a data center. So it won't be taken off the grid. It's about the size of half of a container truck, and it's going to become revolutionary, not just in the data center business, but we're going to see it across the board. And it's about time we got back to nuclear power, and I think it is going to be a winner coming forward.
Yeah, I agree with the nukes. Let me tell you, the polling for data centers is just absolutely horrific. People don't want the noise. They don't want they know or they feel like their power is going to be, they're going to have to pay more for their power and the water that it sucks up. For example, they want to put one down here in the Tampa Bay area, in Pinellas County.
Yep.
And people are furious because we're down here on a water restriction, and you're going to put a data center in that can scoop up water left and right. Let me tell you who's going to make the money in the end on this, John. And this is why I got in on this IPO for SpaceX. Mm-hmm. It's because in the end, Elon Musk is right. You're going to have to take these centers and build them in space. You're going to have to build them somewhere where it's cold, where you don't need the water to cool it, and where you have all the space in the world. So there's a method to the madness of us going to the moon. Again, we're not going to go there just to plant a flag.
Right.
We're going to go down there. Who knows? Could take 10 years. But with AI growing like it is, there's going to have to be somewhere to put these places because there's only so much resource out there. Anyway, what else you got?
Well, let's go to the last loser of the week is really Ireland and the UK and Western Europe. And we saw the riots in Ireland this past week. A citizen was beheaded by an immigrant who came in and declared it was their country and their neighborhoods. And the countries are just staying back. They're not fighting. They're not going through. They're not dealing with this issue. And if they don't wake up in Western Europe, then the U.S. will be isolated because Europe will end up being an Islamic republic sooner than later. And if we don't wake up for the country, this is the problem for the entire world. And we're seeing the same thing in Seattle. We're seeing the same thing in other pockets, Minneapolis. If we don't wake up, we're going to lose our country.
Well, and it's doing nothing but help Nigel Farage, even though it's a different country in essence. It's part of the UK. But Nigel's jumped all over it. My buddy Nigel, I had a dinner with him several years ago, and I can tell you one thing: he's very smart, and he can drink some great red wine. He loves him. He loves his red wine. I got one more loser, sadly, and this is really sadly, and it does touch on golf. Phil Mickelson got thrown out of his own club. And I don't know, whenever you're a celebrity, you're always a sitting duck. And so I don't know if anything happened or not. But I know between Liv and everything else, I want to see Phil Mickelson get back on track because I've always liked him as a golfer, and I hope that he can get through this.
Yeah, he's really struggled over the years with maintaining those things. I know he had the issues early on and got a psychologist, one of these great win streaks, and I just hope that he does because he's certainly meant a lot to the game.
All right, so this is what I promised. Nobody's getting it anywhere before they get it on this show. Insider advantage, as I told you, people don't realize we have been ranked, John, in the top 3 in 3 presidential races, in the last 3, by Real Clear Politics, by ActiVote, by Atlas Intel, who did their own rankings. They did very well. We, generally speaking, have polled these battleground states better than anybody. And I think we're in the all-time top level since 2014, I think, or 16. RCP did an all-time rating of multi-state pollsters. And I think we beat every newspaper in the country. We might have been tied with Fox News. I don't remember. All the other networks were behind us, CNN, all the things you hear all the time. Oh, they've much vaulted. So we know, and we came from Georgia, right? We started in Georgia.
Matt, and I'll tell you, having done this program, a lot of folks, and I mentioned I'm with Matt Towery, they do know that, and people around the country know it and recognize it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. But you guys have been tremendous, and it is very well known, and we need to, you need to keep doing it because you're the ones that speaking the truth. I'm
going to decide that June 30th. I'm serious. I may be out of the business on June 30th.
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah, I might. It just depends. But up until then, I'm going to keep doing this stuff. All right. So here's the deal.
Yeah.
The last polling that everyone did right after, including us, after the Georgia primaries showed basically in the Senate race, Collins ahead, and in the race for governor, it showed Burt Jones, lieutenant governor, ahead, I think, by a comfortable 6 points. So 3 weeks later, because Georgia lets their runoffs go on and on and on, we go out and we poll the middle of the week. And my polling group says, hey, Matt, we need to poll the middle of the week because we got a feeling something's changing here. Mm-hmm. I said, I hate spending that extra money, but yeah, let's do it. Let's make sure we get this right. You know what came back to us, folks? Rick Jackson leading by 10 points, dominating early voting, over 60%.
Wow.
60% he got in early voting. And then when you go to the Senate race, Mike Collins, who was ahead, in a dead-even battle with Derek Dooley, who appears to be surging. What do you think about that, John?
Do you get a sense on Jackson whether it's a rural or metropolitan vote for him?
That's a very good question. Here's what I think happened. You know, the Jackson campaign, they're very smart. They've been around. These are folks who have done campaigns, so they're at the top level. They did a phenomenal job of voter ID. I'm guessing. I don't know because I haven't talked to them. I don't talk to these folks. But I think, knowing them, they did what I would have done. And in essence, I would have started immediately via text, via whatever, identifying who my voters were, and then getting back to them and making sure they turned out for early voting to bank them in. Don't worry about the last day, get them in there. That's the only way you reverse being 6 points down to being 10 points up. That's a huge reversal. Yeah. That's the only way you do it. You don't do it with TV. Now, he did run an ad that implied that Governor Kemp had endorsed him that was pretty misleading. But hey, it's politics, I'm not going to put anybody down for a little bit of fun. He did it, and it probably had an effect as well. But I as many campaigns as I've been through, I've been doing this stuff for many, many, many years. I can see when the pros are involved in what they did. They did voter ID and a great GOTV effort, and that's what really turned around. But to your question about North Georgia or South Georgia, it's all North Georgia. They basically concentrated in the northern arc, and they got a hell of a turnout in early voting. And he's doing much better. And what will happen probably is you're going to see Burt Jones carry 140 counties, or thereabouts. But they're going to be little counties. And then you're going to see Jackson carried the stuff that makes the difference. And now, I'm
Yeah.
not saying this now. Look, here's the thing. In just a minute, everyone's going to get to see an update that we're going to edit into this that will have the new numbers from Sunday night, the freshest Insider Advantage numbers in just a few minutes. But John, you won't be there for it with me because you'll be at your yacht club or whatever on Sunday. And
No, I'll be back in D.C. on trial, Matt. So.
Okay, all right. Well, everybody kids me about being on the golf course. My golf course is closed right now, so for the usual aeration and everything they do. So I probably won't be on a golf course. I will be working on this poll. So stick after we finish talking. Don't quit because we've set it up. Now we got to get to the next part, and that is what are the final numbers, which we'll have. By the way, I could tell you the lieutenant governor's race, Dolezal appears to be leading. I found that rather shocking because I'd seen in most polls that John F. Kennedy, yes, there's a John F. Kennedy in every state, folks, for our viewers around the country. Yeah. There's a John F. Kennedy in Louisiana. There's a John F. Kennedy in Georgia. I don't know why in the hell my parents didn't name me John F. Kennedy. Maybe I could have got elected further than the Georgia House of Representatives. And I do want to say one thing before we sign off. This is Georgia related again. I served with a man named Larry Walker for many years, the years I was in the Georgia House. Larry was the majority leader of the Democrats. We were the minority at that time as Republicans. He was a gentleman, a scholar. Larry and I did some business stuff together. And then I asked Larry to be a writer for the magazine we own in Georgia, James Magazine, which, as you know, is the top magazine in the state, John. And you've been a great supporter of that magazine over the years. Larry passed away this last week, and he will be truly missed. He was a great writer, but he was a man for all seasons. He was a true Renaissance man. You agree?
He was. He'll be missed, and it's that kind of person that commits to public office that's able to work and actually accomplish things. And he was amazing at it. So he will be missed.
Well, I do imitations. I can do almost any voice in the world.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, I can do anything. Someday we're going to do a show. You're going to interview me. I will be Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump. I mean, did you not know I was a stand-up comic in Vegas?
Well, I know you're pretty funny, but I didn't know you were a stand-up comic.
I did. I actually performed at the old Riviera Hotel. And Steve Sharippa, who was on became a big star on The Sopranos. Steve was in charge of entertainment at the Riviera, and Steve said, he said, I want you to come out because, long story, and, play one night at their comedy place. I did it. He calls me up, he says, hey, we want to give you like a 2-month, gig. I said, Steve, there's no way I can stay out in Las Vegas for 2 months. This was just for fun. But but we're going to do a show where literally you're going to ask me any question you want, and we're not going to prepare it, and I'm going to give you an answer. But Larry Walker would have said something like this: Matt, why don't you please give me those new polling numbers? So with that, we're going to attach right now the update. Here it comes. Hello, everybody. Matt Towery here. As promised, I'm going to give you the update in the governor's race and Senate races in Georgia in just a minute. And by the way, that old crow you hear in the background is not Joy Behar. We're actually on the golf course. I'm at the house right now. I'm going to get back out there as soon as I can. By the way, the podcast you're watching, please keep watching it each week. We have great guests. John Hall and I do. We've had Terry Bradshaw, the NFL great. We've had Greg Jarrett, the legal analyst for Fox News. We've had Robert Cahaley, the bow-tied one, as I call him, the bow-tied pollster, who I work with a great deal, and many others. And we're going to keep having great guests and continue to talk about the issues of the day. I'm going to tell you who's up, who's down, who's up on the leaderboard, who's going down on the leaderboard. And we're going to have a great time as we get towards the election, because we're going to have a lot of ups and downs, I'm predicting, during this election season. Now, let's get to those Georgia numbers, okay? In the U.S. Senate, it looked like last night in our polling, the race was completely tied. But it's not tied as of now. We ended Sunday with a slight edge for Collins. He's up 2 points. Now, understand, that's within the margin of error. So that's a very close race. And you have to also understand that Governor Kemp has a lot of throw weight in Georgia as well, which has been obvious in the way Dewey has performed in these races. So that's going to be a close race. But the Trump endorsement just might make the difference for Collins. We have to wait and see. It's not really clear yet because we had to end the polling. We have another day tomorrow. Anything could happen. Now, in the governor's race, we showed earlier in the week a pretty large lead by Rick Jackson. Now, that lead has diminished a little bit as Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who was leading right after the primary, but seemed to lack the ability to build on where he was before, had slipped a great deal. It was about 10 points, as we said. Now that race is a 3-point race. Burt Jones trails Jackson by 3. It's a solid 3, but anything could change. And again, momentum seems to be in Jones's direction. So the numbers look like right now, Jackson ahead by 3, could be more, could be less, we'll see. And in the Senate race, what was a dead heat, by 2 points within the margin of error now, it looks like Collins. But we're going to keep watching this as this race develops. I want to say that Insider Advantage, I think we're the only pollsters who are in the Real Clear Politics average who have polled this race in the last week. Now, there was a poll by Signal, very fine organization, and that showed Jackson about where we had Jackson earlier in the week. So I would think if that's what they saw then, that this compression that we're seeing right now would make sense. This always happens in races, as the undecideds have gone really down on both sides, both the governor's race and the Senate race. Now, Jackson's strength continues to be in Metro Atlanta and in the early vote where he led by 60+%. It looks like Dooley has his strength in the suburban areas as well, and he's doing well among women. Now, both of those candidates are taking on the Trump-endorsed candidates. The Trump-endorsed candidates seem to be doing better in other areas of the state, and particularly among men. So it's an interesting combination. We'll see what happens. We try to always get it right at Insider Advantage. We normally always do, but boy, these are two tough races. And so it's going to be anybody's ball game. We're looking forward to seeing what the results are. We love all our folks in Georgia. Come on down and visit us here in Florida. In the meantime, I'm Matt Towery for Insider Advantage, and for the Leaderboard with Matt Towery and John Hall, I'm going to go back and see if I can miss some more putts. Thanks for joining us. Well, guys, we are really fortunate to have Eric Eggers join us today. He is a top expert in, well, of all things, voter fraud. Imagine that. And the author of the book, and I want to make sure I get this right because it's a fantastic book, but I will get the title right. Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. How apropos, given everything that's gone on in the last few weeks. Eric, thanks for joining us. And meet John Hall. He is in Atlanta, and he is a true bulldog.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope that you're a safer driver than some of your fellow alumni, sir.
No doubt, and I hope you're enjoying Tallahassee and all the great things that Florida State brings. My first football game was Florida State in the early 70s in the old aluminum stadium where everybody just rocked it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I was disappointed because we were actually supposed to have, I think, a home-and-home series, right, in Athens and Tallahassee, and then somehow the last couple of years it got canceled. Of course, with Florida State's on-field performance the last couple of years, it's maybe not the worst thing in the world for us, but it was going to be a good time for us to see you guys. I do want to get to a game in Athens sometime.
FSU will come back at some point. I am a bulldog, admittedly. My dog's name is Dooley, named by Barbara Dooley, of all things. Long story there. Coach Dooley's, our late coach's wife. But I went to law school at Stetson, so of course I had FSU, Florida Gators, you name it, USF, a lot of USF. So I root for everybody. So, Eric, let's get right to it. What are your reflections on this California debacle?
You know, so it's funny, you mentioned the title of my book, and my publisher always loves it when people do that, so thank you very much. But I would say the crazy thing about that book is it came out in 2018, right? So, so the title, Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election, people gave me a lot of credit. I'm not sure I deserved it with what happened in 2020, because like what I document in that book is there's basically kind of two main areas of vulnerability for elections. Number one is the voter rolls, right? When you have names on voter rolls that shouldn't be there, it makes it much easier for people to cast ballots that shouldn't be. And, I talk about in the book how the Supreme Court has even cited statistics that 1 in 8 voter registrations in this country are wrong or flawed or erroneous or incomplete, or just like there's duplicate registrations in a number of states. There's over 2,000 people registered in the state of Florida that voted in the second state in 2016. So we have problems there. And then we also talk about how it used to be an uncontroversial opinion. There were bipartisan commissions that talked about how the least secure way to cast ballots is via the mail. So absentee ballots are, easier to manipulate and steal and misdirect and overstuff and all these other things. And so then 2020 happens, and we cast the most ballots ever in the least secure way possible. And then we were told by everyone in charge, no, this was the fairest, the most accurate election in history. And oh, by the way, if you dare to question that, we will take you off of social media. At best, at worst, you might go to prison, as some did. So, that's the backstory. And then that brings us to California. My reflections are, California is sort of like what happened in 2020 on steroids, but it's not an accident. California, or at least in 2020, what you could say is, hey, it's COVID. We're kind of trying to figure this out. We're trying to stay safe, although I would argue that democracy actually was fatally ill because of that. But then California, it's been 15 years of them slowly but surely changing the laws to make it be so that you have lots of flawed registrations. You get registered to vote when you get your driver's license. Of course, you don't have to be a citizen to get a driver's license. And then we mail everybody that's registered a ballot, and then they have legalized ballot harvesting, or basically paid electioneers who get jobs, to go out and collect ballots, including from people on Skid Row, homeless people. You got NGOs getting all this kind of money to go out and help kind of hustle the vote. They don't chase voters, they chase ballots now. So when you see all these late arriving votes come in, to me, it's just a natural byproduct of an insane system that has been designed on purpose to, I think, create confusion, chaos, and give people not very much confidence in the result.
Okay, so Eric, it was 2020. The 2020 elections were over. I had polled all of those for the Fox affiliates that were owned and operated by Fox, and we did very well. We actually, we all knew that Trump was going to be closer in that race than the pollsters had it. So we go to Atlanta to visit my family, and we stay at a hotel that's fairly near where the Braves play baseball now. And it wasn't a great hotel, but we didn't have a lot of choices. Had our dog with us. So we stayed there, and the first day we got there, we noticed all of these cars in the parking lot. Now, remember what's going on at that point. The Georgia runoff elections and the U.S. Senate, the two at the same time. So we get there, and there are cars everywhere. They've all got these stickers, like they sort of left-leaning, I'm with her, or Biden, whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe we just, an odd group of folks came here. We're just going to stand out as the lone conservatives. My wife, who's inquisitive, goes to talk to the person at the desk and says, what are all these cars doing here? So, they're here for the election. Well, then I look a little deeper, and I see these little credentials hanging, off the mirror and the car and the like. We go to my family's house for Christmas Eve, and we go back to the hotel. And there's a little room off to the side, probably holds 60 or 70 people. I don't know if it had a pool table in it or what. And they're all gathered in there, and they're talking. Well, being the inquiring semi-reporter that I am, I just decided to hang out and listen. And I literally heard things like this. That was my ballot. There is no way I was going to let that ballot go. They were talking about their ballot harvesting. None of them were from Georgia. And think about this. While the Republicans were at home, snug in bed with their family enjoying Christmas, these people on Christmas Eve are going ballot harvesting in Georgia. And that's what happened in Georgia. Let me switch to you, John. I know you got a question.
No, Eric, I really do worry right now about the state of the election process and the country generally. You look at what's going on in Iraq and the reporting concerning that. You look at, Iran, and then you look at what's going on in California and other states. Is there a way out of this? Is there any way, if we don't change hearts and minds, that this is not going to lead to disaster?
So, that's a good question. And I will say this from my perspective. Now, I'm sort of naturally optimistic. Maybe it's just because I live in Florida and I get a lot of sunshine, right? But I think that what's happening is actually positive for people to kind of share our concerns. And I'll tell you why. So I interviewed recently the chair of the Los Angeles GOP. So they kind of, were behind the Spencer Pratt run. They were optimistic. And then obviously they saw these kind of late arriving ballots come in and, kind of bump him out of the top two there. But the chair, Roxanne Hogue, called Spencer Pratt and his success, the emperor has no clothes candidate, because if you remember the story, everyone's kind of pretends that this emperor and everything he's doing is fine, even though he's actually naked. And then a child says, no, he doesn't actually have any clothes. And that's what Spencer Pratt did in Los Angeles. He said, listen, this is terrible, right? Like, our houses are burned down. We have homeless people pooping on the street. Like, none of this is okay. And everyone kind of woke up and like, hey, you're right? So even if he didn't make it to the top 2, the fact that he was able to kind of hold a mirror up to what everyone recognized as a disaster had this kind of awakening and clarifying effect on a lot of people that previously kind of didn't have that level of consciousness. And I think what's happening in California now at the national level is kind of the emperor has no clothes moment again for how they choose to conduct elections. And why I think it matters is, and you guys, if you guys are in Georgia, I always cite what happened after Georgia decided. 2020 was crazy. You just mentioned the runoffs and all these ballots that you're seeing in your hotel. I do, just as an aside, want to note how often you invoke your dog in these stories. It's just fun that you're 2 for 2 so far. but
I only said Dewey's name once.
Twice.
So we're doing that, right? So. And then, in Georgia, as a result, says, hey, like, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to change our laws. Like, we're going to go back to common sense reforms. We're going to say, elections are meant to be these politically sterile environments. So we're not going to let people hand out, campaign material within a certain number of feet of the polling place, which is always how it's been, right? Even if that material is wrapped around bottles of water, whatever it is. And you guys know, like, the world lost its mind. Like, if there's a real effort to try to make Delta leave Atlanta, like, there's some real juice behind this thing. You guys lost the Major League Baseball All-Star game because we still kind of had this carryover from 2020 fever dream. We weren't allowed to just be honest about things. So I'm just saying, 5 years later, I think you've got a lot of kind of neutral or even left-leaning reporters like Nate Silver saying, California, if you guys can't count your ballots on time, that's a problem. Gavin Newsom even wrote letters to the election officials because he's like, hey guys, can we speed this up a little bit? And because it's California, they go, absolutely not. Get off my lawn. So I think as a country, the conversation we're able to have now, I mean, you guys remember, I know, Mark, especially you, when in 2016, Donald Trump wins for the first time, he created a commission to try to look into election integrity, right? They have Chris Kobach come and chair this thing. And the country was so not ready for that, it got sued out of existence by these Mark Elias-backed groups and everything else. So I do think now you're in a place where the Department of Justice, you got Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Saley saying we're auditing the voter rolls in California. Harmeet Dillon is kind of being proactive at the Civil Rights Division. We could talk about like how different it is to have someone like Harmeet Dillon in the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ versus somebody like Tom Perez and what he was all about. But I'm just saying, I think they're only able to do what the public wants to support. And I just think when you see what a disaster California is and will continue to be, I think that's how you win, to your point, hearts and minds.
So, Eric, one of the things, as lawyers, even though I'm a pollster, I'm a lawyer as well. I don't know who's hated more, pollsters or lawyers, but anyway, or less trusted.
Or which one gets paid more.
Well, yeah, that's a good question, too. So, in the end, you hear, I wrote a piece for our magazine up in Georgia a couple months ago called Debunking the Debunkers. And really what I was trying to point out is you constantly heard the media say, that's been debunked. It's all been debunked. Well, in reality, in Georgia, for example, hardly a single case got to the point where the merits of the case were heard. It was always dismissed for lack of standing. And in fact, I want you to chime in a minute on this, John. The only case I can recall that really was heard where there was evidence presented was the case that actually the judge ruled in favor. Then it was appealed. The judge came back and he said, maybe I made a mistake. It finally went to, I think, the Georgia Court of Appeals or Supreme Court. They slammed it in the positive way, said, no, this thing's going forward. And that is the case that allowed the FBI to come into Georgia to confiscate the ballots in Fulton County. And John, am I correct in that? I believe
that was the only one that went to that process. And it's still bogged down now, even though they kicked it back.
Right, although they have the ballots. And that's what I would ask you about next, Eric. I know for a fact that the FBI, and you do too, the FBI is actively looking over those ballots. I understand some of them have been degraded. Gee, imagine that. Fulton County put it in, they moved it from warehouse to warehouse. And I imagine that it wasn't exactly climate controlled to preserve the quality. But there was the big issue of a large number of ballots that someone who we both know, Susie Voiles, who is she's not going to lie, who saw large, massive amounts of ballots that were allegedly mail-in. None of them had a crease. All of them had the same markings, the same pattern. And my understanding is that the FBI is now trying to look that over and see if they can reconstruct it. And in my opinion, that could be one of the big smoking guns. What's your thought on whether or not there will ever be any real prosecutions or any real case brought forward that strings all of this mysterious stuff that took place in 2020 together?
Well, I think, again, I'm not a lawyer. I do watch a lot of like detective shows. My kids and I love Elspeth, and so
that's about as good as we are. Don't worry.
But I would say, I'm not optimistic that any charges will be brought based on the circumstances that you just detailed because of what you just said. Like, we don't have chain of custody, right? So, I mean, that's always the problem. That's why voter fraud is never actually prosecuted in a meaningful way, because you can't connect the ballot, as fraudulent as it may be, with the actual voter. And I was thinking about this recently because I do think on the one hand, it's telling that you're seeing so much fraud exposed across the country in all these different welfare programs and other systems, right? And the reason why you're able to prosecute people for that kind of fraud is because there's a paper trail. Like, you can follow the money that went from, hey, this government agency dispensed this much money to this social security number or this identification number, whatever it is. And then you can say, hey, did this money get connected to this service, which you billed us for? But, that there's no actual children here. They just found some homeless people, ironically, with 185 people registered to vote in Los Angeles, and there's no actual beds there. And that homeless shelter actually received $600,000 from one of the mayoral candidates. Fun fact. But the point is, you can do a forensic audit. You can connect dots. You can find evidence that allows you to bring charges in other kinds of fraud. In election fraud, yeah, you can have some registrations and you can know that person showed up to vote, but you can't figure out which ballot that person cast. You can't figure out who they voted for, which is why it's almost impossible to overturn elections, because you have to find so many ballots that were cast that shouldn't have been, that's greater than the margin of victory, right? But I think it's got to be double the margin of victory or something, because you have to be able to say, all right, well, even if, because we can't prove all these flawed ballots went for this one candidate. So, but I do think it would be meaningful, and I haven't read your piece, but I would love to check it out, the Debunking the Debunkers. I think it would be very meaningful for people to present actual evidence. Look, here's 10,000 ballots that are brand new that showed up. So, what do we know? We know a candidate was ahead. Then things shut down overnight. All of a sudden, the numbers changed dramatically. Oh, by the way, we happen to have these vast stores of ballots that don't appear to actually have ever been touched by human beings. They didn't sit on a counter. They didn't get touched by the things. We could talk about the locations of the ballot drop boxes and the lack of supervision in Georgia. I know you guys probably know a lot about that, and the strategic locations they put those in, the lack of supervision. But I'm just saying, so there's lots of questions, lots of problems. You'd have to kind of present a comprehensive, here's what we do know. But I do think, as far as chain of custody, can we connect these flawed voters to these flawed ballots? It's going to be really hard.
Yeah, it's, looking forward, going up to the next presidential election, I know we're still a ways away, but with communist and socialist and who knows what the guy in Maine is, ended up getting elected and going through these, or at least, getting nominated and moving forward to elections. Who do you think will arise out of the Democratic Party to be a candidate that might be able to coalesce somebody to be very competitive?
Well, I think, look, man, it's fun to say on this podcast, but us white guys are having a moment, even the Democrat Party, because, after the Kamala Harris thing, and obviously the Democrat Party has always evaluated or always elevated identity politics, and obviously they've embraced DEI in significant ways. But the quiet part, that's why they didn't even want to let anybody run against Kamala Harris in this nominating thing. They said, we can't overstep an African-American woman. They're essential to this party. But what they realized is, look, man, we have lost white men. And I think the tell on this, there's two examples I like to cite that I think show you where the thinking is, the quiet part they don't want to say out loud. Number one is Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom, after 2024, the Democrat Party says, we got to do the soul searching. We got to have these conversations. We got to reach out. So he starts a podcast. And like the first 10 guests he has on his podcast are white dudes. And, which I think is like you would be hard pressed to find any other left-leaning media outlet that would do that, right? It's certainly not the case on MSNBC. Yeah. So there's that, right? And they invite even when they're not inviting like Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, and those guys, they're talking to white guys because I think they know they need to kind of reach back out to them. The other thing I thought was very clever, but so you mentioned these candidates that the Dems are running right now, including Graham Plattner in Maine, but they also won a primary in Texas in their Senate race with James Tallarico over Jasmine Crockett. And I thought that was telling because remember what happened? What was like the one big media moment that elevated James Tallarico on a national level? It's when he sat down with Stephen Colbert, another white guy, and they did this interview, and then they said, oh, no, CBS and the FCC are telling us that we're not allowed to run this, so we're not going to do it. And then Jasmine Crockett, no less than Jasmine Crockett, said, that's not true, right? So you guys have actually kind of lied about what you were not able to do, but the result of that was it created a lot of attention, a lot of buzz, and it elevated one candidate over another. It just so happened to be the white male. And so I think you see whoever it is, but I think that they realize this kind of the DEI embrace, the trans children stuff, it hasn't worked. So on some level, I think they realize they're going to need to kind of find somebody that appeals to more of the country than Kamala Harris did.
So I have one last question, and it doesn't have to do with anything we talked about so far, but you're also a filmmaker, and you made The Creepy Line, which that is a scary, again, it's a while back, but it was about Google and all the information that Google has about us. Tell me how creepier do things get now that we have AI? So, scare me to death.
Well, listen, I just want to say the only reason why I produce films is so I can get away with wearing T-shirts in interviews. It just kind of gives me a little bit of that Silicon Valley vibe.
You're Hollywood.
Like yeah, buddy. Yeah. So yeah, that's actually a really fun project I worked on with Peter Schweitzer, who's the president of the Government Accountability Institute. I do a podcast with him called The Drill Down. He's great. And so, yeah, we kind of like worked on, we did some research, and it was about how Google and Facebook are collecting all this information, how they know so much more about us than I think we realize. But I would just say, rather than scare you, I will make you think about something. And here's what I'll make you think about. There's always a gap between when a technology gets introduced and when we as a society figure out how to appropriately use and govern that technology, right? I know as conservatives, we don't love the idea of big brother and big government kind of having all these laws, but cars get invented around 1910, yeah? And cars exist for a long time, and it's not till the 1960s that any of them have seatbelts. And then it's not till the 1980s that we're like, hey, maybe we should require the use of seatbelts. We started using chemicals for a long time, and we didn't create the Environmental Protection Agency until the 1970s. We thought it was totally cool to just pour stuff in the river, and that they happen to catch on fire every once in a while. No big deal, right? But the point is, society, we're always thinking, we're always evolving, we're always inventing and creating stuff. But those things that we invent and create do have an impact on the larger society they exist in. And, it's the appropriate role, I think, of government to kind of figure out, well, should we have any rules against that stuff? Yeah. Hey, I'm not, I'm anti-prohibition, but we still can't feed an 8-year-old scotch, right? There are things that we have to do. So I just say the internet, social media, are things that have been around now for a couple decades, and we're just now beginning to have the conversation about what is the appropriate use of regulation and legislation. You saw Australia has banned social media for children under the age of 16. So that is a conversation I think we're still in the early stages of having. And so the scary part about AI, I guess I would just say, is AI is like social media on growth hormones. So it evolves and adapts and consumes and engages and titillates the brain in an addictive way more quickly than any of the other things, right? Like social media, triggers these dopamine receptors, which are the same part of your brain that gets triggered for cigarettes or alcohol or gambling or pornography, all things that we have laws about what age you're allowed to engage with them on. So AI, I think, can take the addictive nature or the manipulative nature of social media and escalate it exponentially. And we as a society kind of govern things at a glacial pace, not a quick one. So I think you're about to see the gap grow even greater between this thing that exists that's impacting us and our understanding of it and our desire or kind of our decision-making process about how to regulate it.
Yeah, and it's so hard right now to get any kind of consensus in this country on anything, as we all know. So it's probably going to be a long time before we get those guardrails in.
And by the way, and not to interrupt, you know who's totally cool with that? The companies, right? They're spending lots and lots of money to keep us from wanting to have those conversations. So it will be a long time, and the companies who are making billions of dollars aren't interested in us having that conversation anytime soon because it's just going to negatively impact their bottom lines. That's actually what we study here at the Government Accountability Institute, the influence of money on politics, and so decisions don't necessarily get made for what's in the best interest of society, get made in the best interest of the people making those decisions. And that's another factor, absolutely.
John, bring us home. Last question.
Well, Eric, just let me know when you're going to come up for a Georgia game. I'll get you good seats and make sure that you're well taken care of.
Hey, you will regret saying that because I'm going to show up in, I say that. I'm an expensive date, but no problem. I'll absolutely let you know.
No worries. No worries.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us today. How's the weather there? It's beautiful here in St. Pete. Nice up there in Tallahassee.
Listen to you. There is, I love Tallahassee. There is no weather anywhere that's better than St. Pete. I have to tell you a quick, I love St. Pete. I have relatives who live in St. Pete Beach. We were driving down to St. Pete when COVID was taking over the world, right? It was the day, they holding these CDC press conferences and everything, and I'm driving down to St. Pete. We were scheduled to go to the St. Pete Yacht Club on St. Patrick's Day, and we're table for 12. We're you can't do that anymore. And so inside, and I just remember walking around St. Pete, and all the St. Pete Beach residents are just saying alcohol and sunshine is the cure, brother. So that will always be my St. Pete memory.
Yeah, that's what we did. We lived closer to downtown St. Pete, where you were headed with the yacht club. We would eat outside and really didn't worry about it. It didn't mean we didn't all get COVID at some point or another, but everybody lived through it. It wasn't a big deal. Thank you so much for joining us, Eric. Hope to have you again. All right.
Hey, you guys are the best. Great to see you both. And I'll be in touch about the game. Go Knowles.
You got it.